Harrison and I do this little like clapper thing before we start takes. So I'm just gonna do that. Okay. So today we're here for a Pride Month episode, and I have two close friends of mine, Elsa and Rafe. And we're just going to start off with some statistics because I think everybody knows that the kinds of discrimination that LGBTQIA plus people face contributes to their disparate mental health statistics. And these stats kind of focus on the youth. So that's the kind of research that we did, and that's where we're pulling these statistics from, and all the resources we used will be linked in the description. But LGBTQIA plus teens are 6 times more likely to experience symptoms of depression, 2 times more likely to experience suicidal thoughts or tendencies, or to just like feel suicidal, 4 times more likely to attempt suicide than their heterosexual or cisgender counterparts. And according to a study done by the Trevor Project in 2023, 45% of queer youth had considered suicide in the past year, which these are some pretty staggering statistics, but I think they're important for people to have as we go into this episode. But Pride Month, which is this month, well, when we're recording this, which is June, can prove both beneficial and detrimental to queer mental health, which I'll let our guests speak to in a moment. But just some examples I found in research were that the act of coming together in a safe space with others who share the same struggles can be cathartic, but for those who are not, quote unquote, out of the closet or are only beginning to question their sexuality or gender identity, it can prove a stressful time. But no matter what, Pride Month provides us with a time to celebrate the continued fight for LGBTQIA plus rights and to continue pushing for more safe spaces and awareness. So we're gonna get into the questions now. How this is gonna work is I'm gonna read them out, and if you guys think they're dumb or like you don't have an answer to them, we can just skip them. Kind of ordered them from like what I thought were kind of softballs to like harder questions. So, first question I have for you guys is just like, but baseline, what are some ways you try to take care of your mental health, not just during Pride, but all year round, especially in the face of prejudice or discrimination?
I
I
can go.
can answer.
I'll go first. Uh, One of the most important things for my mental health, especially in, like a really scary climate, has been, in the past and like really important to me now. Uh, Not taking like some of the better parts of my life for granted. I've done a lot of work in shifting my mindset and how I approach things that are difficult and things that make me feel scared or stressed. And that's become really important to getting through my life right now. I'd say I'd say the biggest things are like really appreciating the good things that I have and focusing in on those. Obviously, you don't want to just ignore the bad things, but I try not to let them give them as much mental real estate if I don't think that that's going to be good for me or I don't think that that particular thought like deserves it. And then obviously I have been prioritizing like when I'm not feeling great, getting more sleep. Running is huge for me, and a big reason I want to keep running even though I finished my high school season because that's something that I can focus on without having to think about a lot of the other stuff. It's a very good stress reliever.
Awesome. Yeah, I love that. I love that term you use, mental real estate. Did you coin that or is like,
No, do you want it?
wait, that's awesome. I love that.
You guys
That's
can
so
have that
great.
if you want it.
Thank you. That's a great term to be using. I like the way you phrase that. Rafe, if you don't have anything, or if
No, I think I can. I think you mentioned a lot of good things, and one other thing I would add is like, I don't know how to phrase this, good management of media that you're consuming, especially during Pride Month, but also outside of it. Like, there's a lot of harm. I don't like in whatever form you consume it, if it's through news, if it's through social media, there's a lot of negative discussions, particularly about queer topics that it can go on in online spaces, and making sure that you know how to step back from that is always important so that you're not constantly exposing yourself to negativity. That's like, I feel like that's the easiest way that you can just prevent your mental health from deteriorating is by making sure that you're not actively contributing to the decline.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point to make because I feel like just for like everybody in general, staying offline sometimes and like not forcing yourself to interact with things that make you like super uncomfortable or like hurt your feelings is always like a good way to preserve your own mental health. Okay. And this next one kind of speaks to the bit I said about how Pride Month coming together with other people can prove kind of cathartic to your mental health. But if you guys have any, what are some Pride Month events that have made you feel solidarity and celebration within your community?
I I don't actually go to the big St. Louis Pride every year, mostly because it's hot. Uh, but Tower Grove Pride in here in St. Louis, which happens, earlier in the year when it's a lot cooler. Big fan of that. Uh, I and then I guess I appreciate seeing a lot of the stuff that small businesses around town will have like maybe like a little Pride Month like sign or a product, and those are just always nice to see. I'll I'll fall prey to marketing. I'll get them. Small businesses, and
I
then
think, oh,
and then stuff at school.
Yeah, Ray, sorry, you
I
had
don't think I interact much during Pride Month just because I don't, like June's generally a busy month for me. I've gone to Tower Grove once and loved that, but I'm also not a huge, like, big space with lots of people kind of person. So I think more of my stuff. Also, you mentioned small businesses. I love that. I love specifically like there are some businesses in the St. Louis area that do like little book reading, book circles. There are like game shops that have game nights or that kind of thing. So they're like little events during Pride Month that like small businesses will host that I highly recommend going to because they're always very enjoyable. They've got a great community, and it's also a great way, like, if you're interested, especially in literature, to learn about a lot of great literature that you could be reading, because there is a lot of great, like, queer literature out there that you don't really get exposed to that much through other sources. So I think that book circles are a great opportunity, and I'm sure that there's always some kind of local bookstore hosting that kind of thing, or at least I've seen a lot of them, so it's my personal favorite kind of event.
Okay, that's awesome. Because one part of this is supposed to be just like for viewers in the St. Louis area, or for anybody who's like questioning just like ways to get involved with the community in ways that might benefit their mental health. So those are some really valuable examples to have. Thank you guys. And the next question is, what are some ways that supporters of the LGBTQIA plus community can be helpful allies for your mental health during Pride Month and again all year round? And if you have any like specific examples or do's and don'ts, just you can cite those just however you want to put it.
One of my favorite things that's really small is just, you know, if you have a queer friend, say Happy Pride Month. It's really nice to hear from. It means a lot to hear it from, people who might not necessarily be as involved in, uh, like social activism or just from, a cisgender or straight friend, just knowing that they're still thinking of you. And that's really just showing that you're aware of like the the big things that are happening, or that it's Pride Month.
I think this is not personal experience from my perspective, but it is personal experience from like perspectives of a lot of friends I have, especially in the current political climate where we're facing a lot of trans rights issues. In general, not just during Pride Month, but throughout the whole year. being affirming to those people, even if it's just with like, you know, making sure that you're using proper pronouns, which you should always do anyway. Um, Maybe just like using their chosen name a little bit extra to make them feel special, something like that, just to be like, hey, I see you, I get you. And it's definitely a difficult time, especially for people who aren't in affirming communities. So if you know someone like that, especially, but year round, not just during Pride Month, making sure that you're always letting your friends know that they have a safe space and just giving them a little extra boost of support.
Okay, awesome. I love those because they're like also very like easy to do. They're so accessible for people to do. And it's good to see that things that are so accessible for others are also like things that make you guys feel so welcomed and accepted. And then I think this kind of goes along with something I asked you a little bit earlier, Elsa, but for those who are not publicly out of the closet or just beginning to question their sexual or gender identity, what is some advice you would have for them that can ease their process of exploration, especially um, during Pride Month?
My biggest piece of advice, especially when I think about like myself when I was younger and figuring this all out, is that it's there's a lot of terms and labels floating around in queer spaces, and some of them overlap. A lot of them mean different things, and it can be a little bit overwhelming. It can be a little bit scary, and sometimes it feels like there's a little bit of pressure to like put yourself in one of those boxes. And my biggest piece of advice would be that you really do not have to. Those labels are there. I truly believe that those labels are really just as a way to, or the closest thing we have to be able to express who we are to some people that have a harder time getting it. And of course, labels make some people feel more comfortable, but I think it's because we have a need to make ourselves heard and understood. And sexuality and gender, especially in a queer context, is very fluid. Pick If there's a label that someone lands on, they don't have to be, you don't have to stick with it forever. It just has to be, and it doesn't have to match someone else's definition of that label. If, as long as it makes you feel comfortable, that's really what matters. I've kind of started moving away from using labels myself, mostly just because I know who I am and what I feel like, and that's the important part to me. And the people around me are going to be fine with uh, however I present myself. I say that I'm bisexual for the sake of simplicity. If people were to ask me, I think that gets the point across, but it doesn't mean, a whole lot to me as a word.
Okay, and I think that's really helpful, especially for viewers who are not within the LGBTQIA plus community, that when they hear somebody describe themselves as like bisexual or like any of the other terms that are in that kind of realm, that there might be more behind that and to not like just have like a one-dimensional view of somebody based on one term you're getting, because maybe, like you said, that's just the easiest way for them to represent themselves to others. Rafe, do you have anything you want to say to this?
I think uh, my main piece of advice would just be embracing uncomfortability, because especially if you're coming from an environment that isn't super accepting of these kinds of topics or identities, it's going to be uncomfortable regardless of how you try to spin it. And for pretty much everyone coming to terms with like a change or some kind of new thing in their identity is uncomfortable. It might be uncomfortable socially. If you have like struggles even accepting that identity at face value, it might be uncomfortable for you internally. But I think the most important thing is not to shy away from that, because then it's just going to compound over time if you decide to like try to put push it down now, and then years later you're still trying to come to terms. It can affect your mental health, and prolonging that kind of like acceptance of your own identity is only going to be worse in the long run. So I think if you're feeling uncomfortable even with accepting yourself and not just with telling other people, then that's fine. Don't try to like erase the uncomfortability by putting yourself back into the closet. Just like say, hey, this isn't great, but I'm just gonna have to live with it. And I'm sure eventually you will find yourself in a position where you have a person you're able to talk to, or at the very least, you're comfortable enough with yourself that you can accept your own identity. And that might be a long process for some people, but it definitely won't come with you trying to avoid the topic itself.
Yeah, and I really like how you kind of spoke to being uncomfortable, because one thing that I'm hearing a lot the older I get is that the more uncomfortable you are, the more change there is in your life. And that means that wherever you're at, it's gonna get better, hopefully, but at least you're doing something to actively change that. And it's hard sometimes, but you kind of have to believe that what you're working towards is better than where you're at now. So I really like that piece that you mentioned. And last question. It's not phrased great because I didn't really know how to put it, but what is something that you wish people outside of the community understood better, or if there's like a myth about pride or the community that you'd like to dispel, and something that you think like might improve your mental health by dispelling? Um, just if you guys have any like tidbits that you'd like to share to that question.
The thing that comes to mind isn't really for your demographic. It's for like slightly older people, I guess.
I think it's fine.
If that
Yeah.
It's just something that I've noticed, and it's really not it's a pretty small thing that I think applies to more than just the queer community, that we have generally moved away from using some words as nouns to describe people. And I noticed that a lot of older people haven't exactly caught on to that, like calling like calling a gay person a gay, and we've moved to using like people first language, so that would be an adjective rather than a noun for a person. So like calling someone a gay person rather than a gay, and it's used pretty universally at this point, like saying a Jewish person or a black person.
Yeah. No, I think that's valuable for even our audience to have because I think people first language is something that not everybody knows. Although I actually thought it was way more widespread than it actually is. But I think that's very valuable, not just for the LGBTQIA community, but also for like really any minority community or like
Yeah.
anybody who has a mental health issue. That's also really important there. So yeah, thank you for bringing that up. That's awesome. Rafe, do you have anything you'd like to share?
I think mine is on a more broad topic. And I think, Priya, you are a perfect example of this, which is that queer topics are not incompatible with religion. I think that's a very important subject that I don't know if it gets brought up a lot, but it's one that uh, I have a lot of religious friends, and including me, and all of them are very accepting. And I think that's something that isn't super talked about in like queer specific like this kind of podcast like media that talks about it, which is that like those two things aren't incompatible, and there are many people who find a way to like maintain their own personal religious identity while still making space for other people. And I don't like I think that it's great for if you are religious and you're like you have a friend or it's you personally who is queer and you're kind of butting up against it. There are many resources online for like queer Christians, queer Muslims, and there's plenty of literature. I'm sure there's some kind of like contact system, like you could email people and ask questions. Point being just that like for that specific conflict of identities, because it's one that comes up in media and in the real world a lot. There are many resources for you to like reach out about it, to talk to people who have personal experience with it, and just know that like as long as you're a nice person, any like queer person that you are a friend with will still want to be your friend. And there are absolutely resources that you can find to help you understand how your religion could be compatible with their identity, or just even how to accept them properly regardless of your religion. And it's just something that I think the idea that those two subjects are incompatible gets floated around a lot, and the truth is that they're really not. And I think it would help a lot of people's interpersonal relationships to just take the step to reach out beyond that kind of barrier that's been created. And yeah.
Okay, awesome. Thank you for speaking to that. We have less than a minute left in recording. So thank you guys so much for being here. I really appreciate you guys speaking to this. And thank you to our viewers for watching. And everybody have a great day. Happy Pride Month, guys.
Bye.
Bye.